I've been trying to keep up with the animated movies from DC Comics ever since Superman Doomsday hit shelves in 2007. When an animated All-Star Superman movie came out, I deliberately skipped it because I hadn't yet read the book. It's a long story. I wanted to wait until the entire story was collected in one single volume and not an expensive absolute volume. Eventually, I did get around to reading All-Star Superman, and I don't think I would be exaggerating if I said it was one of my all-time favorite Superman stories. But it took me longer still to get around to finding the film adaptation of All-Star Superman. I finally did, and I recently watched it, and I found I had things to say about it. So here I am saying things about it. If you have not read the book this movie is based on or watched the movie and you think you have an interest in doing one or both of those things in the future, then I urge you to stop watching and listening to this video because there are going to be spoilers ahead. Before I get to the actual review, allow me to very briefly sum up the plot of this movie. We begin with an incident on the Sun, orchestrated by Lex Luthor. Superman saves the astronauts who are in danger, but at great cost. You see, ordinarily, the Sun is what gives Superman his powers, but being so close to the Sun has essentially poisoned him. Soon, he's going to die. The rest of the movie allegedly details Superman's attempts to leave the world a safe place that can go on existing without him. Now, you may have noticed that I said allegedly there. I do have a problem with this movie, and it's something that I'm just not sure could have easily been reconciled. The comic book miniseries that this movie is based on was 12 issues long. Each issue was a normal 22-ish page comic book, which means the entire saga was 320 pages roughly. This movie has a problem that most of these animated movies have, in that the people making the movie are not allowed to make a movie as long as they feel it deserves to be. They're limited on what they can do and how much they can do, and so each movie gets roughly 75 minutes of playtime. I've made this comparison before, but since it's relevant, I'm going to do it again. Howard Chaykin, a man I've talked about on this channel before, has worked in both television and comics. When comparing the two media, he said that 1 minute of television roughly equals 1 page of a comic book. Assuming that you agree with Chaykin here, that means that a story that was 320 pages is now being condensed into the space that would take about 75 pages. It's because of this that I feel a lot of the impact of the original comic book story is lost when translating it to the silver screen. Sure, some of the things that happened in the comic book are not relevant in the movie, and I would argue they didn't need to be. The issue where Superman turns evil and Jimmy Olsen has to stop him, much as I like that issue, it does not really need to be put into the movie with the stories that were included. The same for the issue with the Superman of the future, where Jonathan Kent dies. That was one of the most emotionally powerful comics I've ever read in my entire life, and I loved it, but how necessary was it to the story of Superman trying to make sure that the world does not need him by the time that he dies? Okay, yeah, that issue does introduce Solaris the Tyrant Son to the narrative, and when you take that out, Solaris suddenly being in the climax of the movie feels very intrusive. In fact, I heard someone who never read the comic who was very angry at this sudden appearance of a character who was not seated earlier in the story just showing up out of nowhere. And you know what? I cannot disagree with that guy. Even though I know who Solaris is, this movie acts like everyone should know who he is when he's a pretty minor character in terms of Superman villains. And then you've got stuff that I am glad did not make it into this movie, like the 2-part Bizarro invasion story. For all you Bizarro fans, if you exist, don't take it personally. I don't hate Bizarro, but I can only take him in very small doses, and I'm still upset that, out of all of the things from Superman lore that Grant Morrison could have spent 2 issues on, he chose Bizarro. The point is, this whole story of All-Star Superman is supposed to be about Superman trying to get his house in order, and while the plot of an individual issue might not seem so important to what's going on, each issue helps to create the sense of Superman getting ready to die. The 2-part Bizarro invasion story, much as I did not care for it, it permeates the rest of the narrative with the sense of hopelessness. Zabarro is doomed, just like Superman is soon to be. The story where Jonathan Kent dies, it shows that even when Superman is on Earth, heck, even when there's 3 Supermen on Earth, sometimes you still cannot save everyone. It's a lesson for our Superman that, whether he's alive or dead, he cannot save everyone, and if that's the case, then maybe this world really is ready to be without him. Each issue is about something, like Superman turning evil for a short time, or Clark Kent being trapped on Rikers Island, but each issue is also about Superman getting ready for death. And when your story is cut down to less than a third of the length that the original story was, you lose a lot of that. Matters are not helped when a third of the story that we did get is devoted to Clark and Lois just hanging out. Clark takes her to the Fortress of Solitude. She gets sprayed with chemicals. She tries to kill Superman. Then they go on a date. Then they meet Samson and Atlas. Superman answers a riddle. It's so weird to me that the movie would choose to keep these, frankly, pointless scenes while removing scenes that actually do, thematically speaking, have a place in this overall story. At no point do I get the feeling that Superman is trying to find a way to make sure that Earth is going to be safe while he's dead in this entire movie. He mentions that he will need replacements when he's dead during the section where the two Kryptonian jerkholes are being mean to him, but that's it. I don't want to give the wrong idea here. I'm not the kind of person who thinks that when adapting a story that you have to do it exactly like the original story. When you're jumping to a different medium, you are using different tools available in that medium that were not available in the original source material. And when you're forced to cut down the story so much, I understand that scenes are going to be taken out. But did it have to be scenes that were more important than 20 minutes of what you did decide to keep? When you get past that, I really didn't have many problems with this movie. There were some things I did not like how at times Perry White sounded way too cartoonish, but since he only got like 6 lines of dialogue in this movie, I can get past that pretty easily. I did have a problem with Lex Luthor's voice here. I am not familiar with Anthony LaPaglia or any of his previous work, so I am not trying to pick on him, but I do think he was the wrong choice for this role. I don't even think he's a bad voice actor, really, but he sounds more like an angry football coach here than a vengeful mad scientist trying to take down his mortal enemy. It could also be that I'm just biased. Out of everyone who has ever played Lex Luthor, live action or animated, I've always preferred Clancy Brown. But I do think even if you did not use Clancy, there could have been better people to capture Luthor for this movie. Or at the very least, there could have been a better way for LaPaglia to play Luthor. On the other hand, there was some fantastic acting in this movie as well. James Denton does a fantastic Superman and Clark Kent. I was familiar with Denton from his work on the 1990s sci-fi thriller series The Pretender, and I had no clue that he was doing Superman here until I looked him up. Not only was he able to change his voice enough for me not to recognize him, but he also just did a good Superman and Clark. If the people behind these movies were forced to keep one actor to play Superman across multiple movies, I would want them to stick with Denton for several animated films. And Christina Hendricks does a good Lois Lane as well. I knew that she was playing Lois before I watched the movie, and I still could not tell that it was her when I was watching it. The animation we get in this movie is also pretty incredible. Probably the thing that consistently impresses me with these movies is that with each story that is based heavily on an existing story, the movie makes an effort to be visually similar to the art in the original story. That could not be an easy feat. But this movie pulls it off maybe better than any of the others in the series, though I have not yet seen the Dark Knight Returns movies, so I am not sure if it beats those two or not. But man, Frank Quitely's art in motion makes me want to see Frank Quitely as an art director on an animated series. Overall, I think this movie would be pretty enjoyable viewing for someone who has never read the original story. A lot of my biggest problems with this movie came from the fact that I had read the original story. I can only imagine that I would have hated this movie a great deal more if I had read the comic immediately before watching the movie. Outside of that, my problems with this movie are few and far between, really. It's well animated, and for the most part, it's well acted. If you wanted to get someone interested in the character of Superman, and maybe even entice them to read some of the comics, I think this would be the thing that you would want to give them, over any of his live-action appearances, and definitely over the other animated features that I've seen. But since I haven't seen them all, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, so I don't know. So what did you guys think? Did you like this movie? Did you like my review of this movie? If so, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And come back tomorrow for some other kind of video. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day.